Okay, in part 2 of Unit 11, the late Middle Ages, we're going to be talking about two major events that have an impact on Europe's current environment during those times and in the future. The first event are the Crusades. Those were attempts by Christians to get back the Holy Land from the Muslim invaders. And then the second huge event that we're going to be talking about is, of course, Black Death. Yeah, about a third to a half of Europe's population is killed by the bubonic plague. So, not to be a Debbie Downer, but those are the two big issues for this video.
Okay, welcome to Unit 11, Part 2. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Crusades and Black Death. Both have a huge impact on the late Middle Ages. Okay, here's your SOL, but the main thing we want to get is that the Crusades will have a tremendous effect on Europe and the Mongol conquest, the fall of Constantinople. All these events are going to lead to issues for Europe, some positive, some negative. And then we're also going to talk about how Black Death had a tremendous impact on both Asia and Europe. And then also the spreading of ideas, Greek and Roman Arabic ideas, is brought in because of the Crusades and Black Death. Okay, so what about the Crusades? Basically, the Crusades are all about getting back a stretch of land. And in 1095, the Holy Land, the area around Jerusalem, was conquered by the Seljuk Turks. That's this area right here. Constantinople was under constant threat, and the Byzantine emperor was begging the Pope for help. And so the Crusades are going to be carried out by Christian, political, and religious leaders in an effort to take control of the Holy Land away from the Muslims.
For over 2 centuries, Christian and Muslim armies are locked in a deadly embrace. From 1096 to 1291 AD, the lands of today's Mideast change hands in a series of 8 crusades. Before the sides part, tens of thousands die in a glut of battles and massacres. In the late 11th century, Muslim sultans rule most of North Africa, Spain, and the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. The Christian world is split in two. In Europe, a collection of small states and kingdoms. To the east, the Byzantine Empire is controlled from its capital in Constantinople.
The Crusades give us a model, they give us a template of the clash of religions and the clash of civilizations and the clash of continents.
In the Mideast, Acre is a lively Muslim city in what is today the north coast of Israel.
There's no denying that it was a major port and a major commercial center. Both commercial and military. Those are the 2 points. You can't just look at it in a military sense.
Acre is also the gateway to the Western world's most sacred piece of real estate. It is called the Holy Land. Its holy core, Jerusalem, a city sacred to Muslims, Christians, and Jews. For some, the dark history of the Crusades evokes the violence that plagues the Mideast today.
Many Muslims, particularly in the Middle East, see the creation and the manner of the creation of Israel as an extension of the Crusades themselves. That is, the arrival and the presence of Westerners.
1,000 years ago, a war between two worlds transformed this center of faith into an unholy battlefield. Today, archaeologists probe the moment in time where a cycle of intolerance and violence began. Some explore elements crucial to moving great armies across continents.
Horses are the most important logistic animal of the Middle Ages. But we don't know anything about the Crusader horse, about heights, about breeds, about species, about anything.
Would you say that was about... I'd say it was about £3 there.
£3.
In England, the role of military technology is evaluated through innovative research.
The idea that the Western Europeans came in with some kind of superior military technology, and that's why the First Crusade was able to win, I think is complete baloney.
And how much baloney have we been fed on the leaders of the Crusades? Historians piece together the personality clash between Richard the Lionheart and the Muslim hero Saladin.
Saladin is a magnificent figure because of the generosity of his character and the generosity of his spirit.
Richard arrives as a brawling, drunken football hooligan, and by the end of his tour to the Middle East, he's a changed man.
What forces drove these men? What motives sparked and fueled 2 centuries of war?
Okay, so the key events of the Crusades. The first thing is Pope Urban gives a speech talking about how it was the duty of Christians and the glory for Christians to get back the Holy Land. And the First Crusade actually works, and they get back the city-state of Jerusalem. They capture it, and they found their own feudal states in there. The Crusaders do. And but then they get a little cocky with themselves, and they lose Jerusalem to an incredible leader named Saladin. And I'm going to have a video about Saladin either posted in this video or posted separately. And then there was just the crazy events of the Fourth Crusade. And John Green will do a much better job of explaining that than me. But basically what happens is the Crusaders will actually be the ones who sack Constantinople and steal a lot of the religious artifacts and those types of things. Okay, so what were the effects of the Crusades? The long-term impact for everyone. Well, first, because the Crusades were so unsuccessful, the Pope and the nobles were weakened. The Pope because of a loss of face with this whole deal, and the nobles because many of them died. So this actually gave strength to monarchs. It also stimulated trade throughout the Mediterranean area and the Middle East. It also leads to a lot of cultural diffusion. The ideas of the Greeks and Romans, which had been kept alive by the Byzantine Empire, were now sort of exposed to the Crusaders, and they took some of that back to Europe. All right, and then probably the thing that has maybe the biggest impact on us today is it left a legacy of bitterness amongst Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Remember, after the First Crusade, when the Crusaders attacked Jerusalem and won it back, they killed every Muslim and Jew that was living in the city, practically. And that was despite the fact that the Muslims did not do that with Saladin. He spared those who surrendered. And finally, it very much weakened the Byzantine Empire to the point where later on they're going to be conquered by the Turks. Okay, so now on your notes, what I would like for you to do is, fill in the chart and create a theory as to why the Crusades had such a big impact on the late Middle Ages. And you will do all of that right there. Talk about the key events, talk about the effects of the Crusade, and then their impact. Okay, so after the Crusades, there were a lot of economic changes in medieval Europe. New trade slowly brought an end to feudalism and manorialism after 1000 AD. And what happened was guilds started to form. There were trade guilds, which protected the rights of people who traded different goods and worked in the marketplace. And there were craft guilds. And you were based on what your skill was, your artisan. What type of artisan were you? Were you a mason that dealt with bricks? Were you a weaver who, weaved cloth? An iron worker? You had to train under a master craftsman, and you were an apprentice. And then when you created your great works, you became part of a guild yourself as a master craftsman. Okay, another big thing is that towns were freed from feudalism. They didn't have to work in the lord of the manor's fields so many days a week. And they start to develop their own economies that weren't just based on agriculture. It also meant increased food production, and more people started to move away from the countryside and into cities and to towns. But all of this is going to be brought to a screeching halt, obviously. And it all happens because of something called Black Death. Okay, we know it better today as the Bubonic Plague, but the main thing you need to know is that it will decimate the population of Asia, and then pretty much a third to a half of the population of Europe. It was spread by fleas on the backs of rats, and it followed the trade routes because the rats were on the ships, and they would bite people, the fleas would, and spread the disease. And it's a very devastating disease. Okay, so what was the impact of Black Death? The Black Death decimated the population of much of Asia and then the population of Europe. We know that. In Europe, over 20 million people died from the bubonic plague. And remember that it starts with a usually some like a swollen area in your groin, and then you have a headache, malaise, fever, and then swelling, and then pus starts to come out of those areas. There's bleeding. It leads to nausea and vomiting, joint pains and aches, and you have these huge, monstrous looking bubbles of just ooze and nastiness. Okay, so like I said, the decline in population is over 20 million in Europe. And because of this, it leads to a scarcity of labor, which actually does have a positive impact on the labor market for the workers. Because of the scarcity of labor, the wages will actually go up in medieval Europe. Towns were still freed from feudal obligations, and there's a decline of church influence. People went to the church to try to save them, and when it didn't work, a lot of people backed away and thought that the church had lost its power. And probably most important is there's a huge disruption of trade because of Black Death. Alright, so the first thing I need you to do is create a theory as to how we would deal with an epidemic like Black Death today. And I'd like you to answer that right here. The next thing I'd like for you to do is analyze how Black Death affected the culture of the Middle Ages. And do that right here. Okay, so what were the big ideas of this video? First, the Crusades were mostly failed attempts by Christians to get back the Holy Land from the Seljuk Turks. The Crusades had many long-term effects on Europe and the Middle East. And finally, Black Death decimated populations of both Asia and Europe and impacted both economically and socially. Alright, make sure you get your journal done after watching the video.